I was diagnosed when I was 7 years old, so 22 years ago, and it doesn't run in my family, anything like that. My mom just noticed I was losing a lot of weight as a 7-year-old. I was already pretty skinny, and classic symptoms of just being really cranky and going to the bathroom a lot. And she decided to bring me to the pediatrician's office, and I just remember that that was the first time that I ever heard my mom cry. And the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, and I, was lucky to get diagnosed before going into DKA, but my blood sugar was pretty high. So I was diagnosed, then put on shots for 2 years, and then went on an insulin pump after that. So I've been on a pump for 20 years now. Yeah, so for the first about 14 years, I used Medtronic, and then I switched to the Omnipod Dash, and now I'm on the Omnipod 5. A lot of people depend on technology to be the be-all end-all of like the fixing of the blood sugar roller coasters and everything like that. And I think that because I've spent so much time getting to know my body's patterns, that I look at technology as like the cherry on top. And so I understand that like the technology and the algorithm has its limits, but it can be so beneficial. So I kind of use, I lean on that. I love the Omnipod 5, but then I also kind of tweak it to meet, what I find is helpful for my body. I think that if you have diabetes, we've all realized that it's never going to be perfect, and that there are days that it's going to be harder than others. And so I think the times that it negatively impacts me are on the days where I like to say like diabetes is just going to diabetes, where there's so many factors, and it literally can be like, oh, it's warmer outside, and like that's when my blood sugar is like tanking that day, right? And you can't necessarily get ahead of everything. So I would say that the negative impact that it has in my life is more on the mental health aspect of it, of that you can do everything that's in your power, but then you still have to accept that sometimes it's not going to be perfect and you're not going to get it right. But kind of how I look at it is I try to really spend time prioritizing my diabetes, because if I can limit the amount of times that it's negatively impacting me, then I'm not going to have as much resentment towards it. I would not be who I am today without diabetes. I think that I know that resilience is something that is such a great quality, and I'm really grateful that I was diagnosed as a child, because it taught me that everybody in life has a challenge, and this is just mine, and you have to learn how to kind of take it for what it is and learn to live with it. And I think it also helps me really just empathize with a lot of other people, and just knowing that everybody has, a certain struggle that they're dealing with behind the scenes. It actually wasn't until social media actually helped me do that. For the majority of my life, teenage years, I would hide my pump in my bra. Like nobody knew that I had type 1 diabetes except for like obviously my close family. And I was really ashamed of it. I thought that I was weird and that like I was not lovable with it. I started dating my now husband senior year of high school, and I like hid it from him for the first 3 years that not 3 years, the first 3 months that we were together. And then I like literally was sweating bullets like the day that I told him, and he looked at me and he was like I know that, like I'm friends with some of your friends, and like there's nothing to worry about. But I think that there was a lot of shame that happens when you are diagnosed and you feel like you're different, whether you're wearing a pump or you have to, just like go to the nurse's office in the middle of class that other people don't have to, or before lunch. And growing up with it, that was the challenge. And when I started posting on Instagram in like 2013, I would take off my pump for all the pictures, or I would shoot pictures on the side without the pump, because I would never be caught dead on an Instagram posting, a picture with my insulin pump. And it wasn't until I saw Beyond Type 1, they were just getting started, and they were posting other people with their pumps, and it was National Diabetes Awareness Month. And I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna do it. And it was, attracted so many other people with type 1 diabetes. And I saw like, wow, like there's people out there that are just like me. And that's kind of what started me feeling more confident and accepting of that. Before I decided to go the route of diabetes health coaching and the company and Risley Health, I was on the path of going to law school. And I remember that during college, I had a really, really terrible habit of stress eating. And there's obviously lots of different stressors in college, but I was studying for my LSATs, which is like the test that you take to go into law school. And the night before I took the test, I was so stressed thinking about it the next day and thinking about like getting enough sleep and am I gonna wake up to my alarm and all of that, that I completely just like binge ate all of the things, all of the snacks in, our like pantry. And if you don't have diabetes, you're like, oh, okay, like, I'm just gonna wake up with a stomach ache. But when you do have diabetes and you don't really know at the time, like I didn't, how to manage my blood sugars and manage a situation like that. My blood sugar was like 400 all night long. I woke up, like looked at my number and was just like, oh my God, like I feel literally like I got hit by a train. And so I think for me, going and taking that test and feeling so horrible, and just like I studied for this test for like 4 or 5 months, and now like game time, have to perform, and you just made a mistake and you didn't honor what your body needed. Like it just complicates things. And I think what I learned and why I have so much passion for helping other people and helping even myself is because diabetes can take away from so much if you don't have that like understanding about relationship to food or your triggers or your insulin dosing strategies and all those different things, because your focus goes down, your mood goes down, your energy goes down. So that was one example, but it not only impacts your day-to-day situations like that, but that transfers over to how you show up in your relationships and your confidence when you're traveling and going outside of your regular routine. So I think it definitely impacts a lot of things, but for me it was mostly, I think, got in the way of just feeling good for things that everybody else does without a problem, but like you just behind the scenes have that like tired, moody, like fatigue kind of feeling when your blood sugars are all over the place. Oh yes, relationships with other people with diabetes have impacted me in such a positive way. I mean, in the beginning, I had 2 friends who I met through Instagram. Rob Howe, who, I don't know if you know him, but he's the founder of the Diabetics Doing Things podcast. And then also Libby, who, she's not on social media anymore, but she used to be like a big type 1 influencer. And the 2 of them just like normalized it for me, where they were the first people who I met with diabetes that I'm like, oh, I would be friends with them even if it wasn't like the diabetes connection, where some other people that I had like met in like elementary school or high school, we just happened to be in kind of like different friend groups and have different interests, and we couldn't bond over anything else. And then the bonding over type 1 diabetes is not like fun. So, or at least it wasn't back then. So I would say that really helped me feel just like less shame for my type 1, and that it's like a very normal thing in a way when you're surrounded by other people that have it. And now, I mean, I speak to and work with hundreds of type 1s, and it's, the bottom line is that when you have so much in common with other people, there's just this like unspoken respect for each other, and just like everybody just feels so seen and feels so heard. So, when I was diagnosed, my parents did the best they could with what they knew, right? And one thing that they wanted to do was teach me that I can do anything that I wanted with type 1 diabetes. And their way of doing that was saying, don't let diabetes slow you down, and just keep going, and like you can keep up, and you don't have to go to diabetes camp, you can go to the regular camp with everybody else. And it was such a positive thing because it helped me realize, yes, I don't have to slow down just because of diabetes, and I can achieve anything I want to. But on the flip side, how it kind of hurt me was it really made me think that being different was bad, right? And being different wasn't a good thing. And so I had to be on everybody else's level, and I don't want anybody to know that I'm a level down inherently just because of my diabetes. So I would say that some of the like shame that came from around that was from not wanting to be different. But then it's also for just like the simple things of like, I remember in 5th grade, I was giving a presentation in the auditorium to my school, and the kid I had a crush on was sitting in the first row, and I saw him like giggling with his friends, and I was like, internally, oh, talking about diabetes makes him not like me. I don't want to do that, right? So this is all like, therapy stuff that comes out years later, but it's just like the classic times when you say, oh, I have diabetes, and then they say, is it the bad kind or the good kind? And you're just kind of like, well, there's not really a good kind, but like, I guess it's the worst kind because there's no cure for it. And then they say, oh, you should really, try to eat less sugar, or you should go on this diet. And you're just like, I smile like, okay, like, thank you for the advice, right? When you know that they don't fully understand. Yes, I think diabetes awareness is really important. I think a lot of people talk about advocacy and awareness in the sense of the type 1 being different than type 2. And to take it even a step further, I think why it's so important is that there's a ton of adults who are getting misdiagnosed as type 2. And so that awareness is not only for the general public, but it's for primary care, like care providers and also endocrinologists, to not just assume that somebody's type 2 because they're an adult presenting with, symptoms of higher blood sugar. I think awareness is really important also, just to help reduce the shame that comes with it and that so many of us also experience. If I can tell a person that doesn't have type 1 diabetes something, I would say that if you know somebody with type 1 diabetes, they are probably struggling a lot behind the scenes that they don't want to share because they don't want to be a burden to you, whether you're family or friend. And so the best thing you can do is just ask an open-ended question of like, hey, tell me more about your type 1 diabetes. Tell me more about, what it's like for you behind the scenes, and just be an ear to listen. And I think a lot of people would really just appreciate that.